everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the 7 Degrees of Change podcast for Charter School Marketplace and introduce you to the distinguished Cecil Brockman, who is a representative in the North Carolina State General Assembly, representing the 60th District. Rather than me giving your bio, if you could kind of tell everybody a bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Cecil Brockman. I'm born and raised in High Point, North Carolina. Went to Union Hill, Jamestown Middle, Ragsdale, UNC Charlotte. Graduated in political science. I've been your state legislator for the past 10 years. I'm a vice chair of K through 12, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. So you're a local, born and raised guy. So you like Raleigh? How's Raleigh?
I deal with Raleigh. I like being home more, just dealing with the lobbyists, dealing with, the politicians and the politics of it all. I cannot wait to get back home and deal with people who could not care less about any of that stuff.
So a true representative. That's fantastic. So give us a little bit of background of your legislative history, because you're known as a charter school or school choice supporter. If you can just kind of give us a roster of some of the things you've accomplished in that area.
Yeah, I feel like every single charter school bill that has passed the state, I've been a part of. I am somebody who I haven't always been. I can tell you this: I'm an avid school choice person, but it's somewhere that I've gotten. I was the legislative assistant for Representative Marcus Brandon, who is most definitely a huge choice person, and we used to get into arguments. I'm going to be honest with you about because I was just a traditional public school person, and Marcus would be really good about bringing up the numbers of what the numbers are for African American kids inside our traditional public schools. And let me tell you, they were not good. 60% of African American kids were considered failing or not on grade level, and that's in our traditional public schools, and that's before the pandemic. And the numbers got even worse after the pandemic, and we're doing everything we can to get our numbers back to where they were, but we got to remember that where they were pretty atrocious for African American students. And so I've supported choice because for me it makes no sense to force any parent, whether African American or whatever, brown or blue, to go to a school that is not doing the job of teaching those kids. And so charter schools, you can look at every single test with every single demographic, and what you will find out is that charter schools do a better job of teaching our students. For African American kids, it was a little bit above 50%, but that's better than over 60%. And so I'm somebody who I think and I think with our legislation that we've passed, we've tried to give more charter schools the ability to have more freedom. I feel like the folks who are traditional public school folks, they are always trying to hamper our charter schools, and they always kind of want to have more control over them. It's like, well, if you're not doing the job, then why are you trying to make them more like you when you're not doing the job of teaching certain students? And so, the legislation that I have focused on, and the legislation that I think we've done a good job of been able to pass during these last few years, is legislation that gives charter schools more freedom, gives charter schools more money, shares the pot of our public schools, because we have to remember that charter schools are public schools. So if you are against charter schools, then you are against public schools. So we have to remember that.
That's a lot to say grace over. Yes, everything you said is 100% correct. So it's about, I remember one of our former state board members said, there's just good policy and there's bad policy.
Right.
It's not about left, right, black, white, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
There's just good and there's bad.
Right.
And it's just good policy to give people a choice of where to put their child in school where they can flourish. And to your point, they are public schools.
Right.
So when people say, I only like public schools, it's like, well, thank you. So you like charters too then, right?
Right. Exactly. And I have to have this conversation with someone and say, listen, every single parent is going to do and make the best educational decision for their child. And they don't care what any of us think, and I have to say, I support that. They're going to make that decision. They know their child best. They know, what's going on in their child's school. If their child is getting bullied, or they're not being as successful as that parent thinks that they can be. You want me to sit there as a legislator and say, no, you have to send that kid to that school where that child is being bullied. You have to send that kid to that school where that child is not getting an education. What sense does that make? That's not a progressive position.
How do people answer that question, I guess? I mean, if you're a parent and you walk into a legislator's office and say, why do you want to shut down my child's school? They're flourishing, and want him or her to go to the school where they were failing. I mean, what do they say in the buildings? Do they have an answer, or they just don't meet people?
I think, I don't have no idea what they say, I'm not somebody who ever gets that. So, it would seem like it would be a very hard answer to have for parents. I would be, I would love to be a fly on the wall.
I never thought about that until you just brought it up. It's like, really, what do they say? They just don't have the meeting, or they just lie. I'm confused.
Yeah, I really wonder, because I don't think there is an appropriate answer for that. And, parents, again, I don't see why we think politicians, are better at answering these types of questions for parents. And, and the truth of the matter is they're failing traditional public schools that I have to say, be honest about, that African-American students have been going to for decades. And, we have folks on my side of the aisle who say, listen, we should shut down charter schools that aren't doing the job of teaching our kids. And I have to tell them, listen, we can shut down a failing charter school in 3 or 4 years if they are consistently failing and not doing the job of teaching our kids. There is a mechanism to shut that school down, and we don't wait decades to do it. But there is no same method to shut down a failing traditional public schools that teach. We have to remember, they teach way more of our kids than charter schools do. And there's nothing to shut those schools down that are failing our kids, And
you just put more money in it.
You just put more money into it, and we think somehow money, is going to be, the magic wand that solves everything. And it doesn't. And then we're somehow baffled at why we, have the same numbers that we've been having for years. Well, at the end of the day, our kids are the ones that are failing. It's not, politicians, it's not anybody else but our children, the folks that we say.
Well,
that we care about
where do
the
their
most.
children go to school, I guess, is the
Right.
question.
Yeah, and it becomes, just an endless cycle, unfortunately.
Do as I say, not as I do. Your kids can go to school there, but might actually go to a private school or a charter school.
Yeah, which there are a lot of, unfortunately, progressives who have their kids in private schools, and then all at the same time say, we don't want you to have that same choice, that has always baffled me as to why you get a choice, but you don't want anybody else to have that same choice that you have. That's not right, and I have to really call them out on that.
Well, the line between Democrat and Republican has certainly faded over the years, because you really just have people, you're saying that's a progressive thing, and then other people say that's a conservative thing, but it's the same thing, because it's the right thing.
Yeah, and I feel like education shouldn't necessarily be a progressive and conservative thing, but I say progressive because I try to challenge my progressive colleagues, because you don't do the same thing over and over again and think that's a progressive thing.
Right.
You can't have consistently failing schools that are failing, the children that you say you care about for years and for decades, and then continue to talk about the same public policy that does nothing different. In fact, all it does is give more money to a system that, is failing the people that you say you care about. That is not progressive. And so, like I said, when I say progressive, I really am trying to challenge those progressives who have this very, kind of backwards feeling about public education, and the fact that one size has to fit all. We have to have the same thing for every single student, regardless of what we know about that student. That makes absolutely no sense.
It's data. I mean,
Right.
You look at where we are internationally with math, science, reading. I mean, we are failing our kids, and when we fail our kids, then we fail our country.
Yeah, and these are the doctors, these are the lawyers, these are our future nurses, these
I don't want to get on an airplane where the pilot, got the job because he was a nice guy
yeah,
and not because he knew how to fly a plane.
or
That's
he
where we're
was a C
headed.
student, I want to get on the A pilot, the one that got an A in pilot class, the one that, I don't know about you, I want to get an A from get my surgery from the A doctor,
That was my next point.
that's,
Well, and it starts in the classroom. It starts with the student and the family and making the right choice. Because in this district, Guilford County Schools is actually a choice district.
yeah,
Because I've said this before, my son went to a magnet school and my daughter went to the IB program, both in Guilford County Schools. So it's amazing when they say choice is bad, but if you look at the website, it says it's a choice district.
yeah.
So it is kind of,
Yeah, and I think Dr. Contreras actually deserves a lot of credit for that. She's somebody who, I think the Guilford School Board really didn't like and they kind of got rid of, but I think she had it right. We can have choices among public schools, choices does not necessarily always have to mean that it's private, but we have to remember that charter schools are public,
Right.
and when we talk about funding, we can't exempt charter schools from that funding, those students, if you go to any charter school and you see the work that's being done, what you see is they are typically, just like a traditional public school that you would go to. So why wouldn't you want to fund them both? Like why wouldn't you want all students to get, an appropriate education? Why are we always pitting public schools against public schools? Like that to me, is another backwards thing that we seem to be doing, is pitting our public schools against each other when I think, in my opinion, we need to increase the pie, give everybody, a little bit more money and help everybody to be able to accomplish the goals of teaching our kids.
well, sadly, on both sides of the aisle, I think dividing and distracting is a priority on both sides. It's not it's a left and right thing. I think the people in power often benefit from keeping people divided. So
Yeah,
it should be a unifying thing.
yeah, I think that's where the more and more I have been in politics, that's the more and more the conclusion that I've come to. I think it's lazy, to do that because it's like, you've got to give your voters enough, respect to be able to just be honest with them, like we have differences among us, but that doesn't mean that, the guy who I'm running against who's a Republican is a bad person or that is evil. We just have differences, and we should be able to just talk those differences out, and that the person who, is proven to be effective, an effective leader and not just somebody who just talks a good game, but can actually go to Raleigh and get stuff done. I feel like those are the people I respect the most because anybody can say anything, I can agree with you 100% on all of your issues.
Sadly, that list is getting shorter every day.
It is. It really is. But if you don't actually can't go to Raleigh and get anything done, like what good are you? Like what good are you? Like you're not doing anybody any good if you can't actually.
Or if you're just a muppet and you do what you're told by,
Right.
by the party boss,
Right.
and not say, well, that's bad for my constituents. I think
Yeah.
we got a problem here.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've got too many Muppets, and we don't have enough people who actually represent their district, and actually fight for, the things that they know that their district needs. I get criticized because that's what I actually try to do, and I'll just say we got $29 million for the city of High Point, more than 30 nonprofits got money, and my biggest criticism is I worked with the other side to get that done. And it's like I'm supposed to wait for my party to be in charge before I start working for my district, and so like that seems unfair to the people I represent, and
Because it is.
it is. It completely is. And it's not why they sent me there. They didn't send me there to wait for 20 to 30 years until, my party's in power before I start working with them. So
Well, this is a lesson in democracy to be certain. So the perceptions, we've talked about just about everything, but perceptions are that charter schools are not public schools. What would you say some of the other perceptions are that people try to throw at the doorstep of charter schools?
that you don't get as good of an education that you would at a traditional public school, when in all the numbers, all the, the tests, when you actually have tests and you see what people actually know. Students do better. Every single, like I said before, every single demographic, students do better. White students do better in charter schools. Black students do better in charter schools. Mexicans do better. Every single demographic does better in charter schools. And you get a good education in charter schools, even though they try to say, well, you don't have to have licensed teachers. They try to throw out all these differences where, charter schools don't necessarily have to have the same rules as our traditional public schools. Well, that's true, but they're actually killing it. They're doing a better job than,
And that, it's the rules, charter schools actually are more accountable with more rules than district schools, but it's how it's couched.
Right.
So there are a few things that differ, but the number of rules, they're even more because you're actually running a business too.
Right.
So you've got all the business end of it too, where schools, as government agencies, they don't have to deal with that. But you've got schools have a lot more rules. Charter schools actually have a lot more rules that they have to follow. But that's kind of in a different bucket that they always like to say, oh no, that's not true. You don't follow any rules.
And more importantly, like they're accountable to the parents who choose to,
Yes.
send their kid to that school, like directly accountable to those parents.
Well, you just ask Kmart how they're doing,
Right.
or Sears, or the other
Circuit City, right.
Circuit City. They didn't cater to their customers properly, so
Right.
they don't exist anymore.
Exactly. And which is how it should be, like the
Free market economy.
Yeah, exactly. If parents, like I say, parents, they are the best, folks to, know what is the right avenue for their children. They should be the ones to decide where their children go. And anybody that says that they shouldn't, you really have to kind of look at them sideways.
Ben Carson made a great comment. I'm kind of ruining it a bit, but he was talking about the brain, and he said for areas that are not used, you have atrophy. And what he was likening it to is charter schools have to completely always be active and doing different things and being innovative to survive, as to where the traditional schools, they don't have to because they just exist no matter what, and they keep going on. So he was likening it to a human brain where you get atrophy if you don't have competition.
Right.
And competition breeds ingenuity, which keeps the brain functioning and alive and growing. And so he was likening that to not having any competition, you atrophy out.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect metaphor, because it's like they get, the students regardless, each and every year they get the same budget, each and every year they get the students that they get rolled in, the teachers, get paid the same, and there's nothing different that they have to do. They just get to, like you said, they just get to exist, and that's not fair. It's really not fair.
And frankly, it's not fair to them either because they're not growing.
Right. Right. And they're not challenged, to do better, and at the end of the day, our students fail,
When they fail, we fail.
Right.
Because our country fails, and then we're all the poisoning of the well.
Yeah. Right.
It's frightening. So charter schools have been around 25 years, and thankfully Marcus brought you into the fold because there are those moments where you can see the light go off in people that maybe had a different mindset, and then when they get it, you can tell people they've got it. I guess that's why they call it the movement. It's not. It was called the charter school movement, but really it's evolved from that. But there's still certain. You have to have that flicker to know what they're all about, and you got that flicker. So how do we get other people to get that trigger going? What do you think?
I think honestly, every single time I talk to people, I think people get it. When you have conversations about like, what would you do in your situation? Where is your kid? Whenever it's your kid, people get it. Like honestly, when for some reason, when it has to be personal to them, it stops being a talking point at one point, and then it becomes personal. When it becomes personal, the people, when they finally get oh, okay, well, I don't have the privilege of sending my kid to this great school that's, an A school, and, I don't have any type of issues, but maybe not everybody has that same advantage. Oh, if suddenly I have an issue with my son, or my daughter, and I might need to look at other choices, then suddenly I think the light bulb moment comes off for a lot of people, because again, everybody, and again, I say this, no, they do not care about what me and you think or anybody else.
Right.
They're going to make the best decision for their kid, and that is sending their kid to charter school. They're going to do it, traditional school that they feel like works for them. They're going to do it. A private school, they're going to do it.
Well, tell us a bit. I know it's not charter schools, but can you give us a bit of a touch on the quote unquote voucher system?
Yeah, I've always
It's not called vouchers here.
Yeah,
but
it's opportunity scholarship.
Sure.
The opportunity scholarship, which expanded to now. I feel like it's a system it follows the money system that has been used a lot.
Because let me interrupt real quick. Because if you're a charter school operator and you don't like the opportunity scholarships, then you're no different than a district not liking a charter school. Because competition breeds.
Right.
So I think if you're a charter school operator, you should want the opportunity scholarships, because that breeds even more competition. So you can't say to a district school, oh, you just don't want us because we're competition, but we don't want them either. Well, no, that knife cuts both ways. You need to want choice for everybody. And we want those opportunity scholarship schools to succeed as well. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we just want schools that are doing the job of teaching our kids. Like that should be, I feel like the end goal is just making sure we have those schools that are actually are doing the job, a good job of teaching our kids. And if that's a good private school, I 100% support it. If it's a good traditional public school, I support it.
Yes.
And if it's a good charter school, I support it. But we don't necessarily like to have conversations about schools, especially traditional public schools that aren't necessarily doing the job of teaching our kids. Private schools or the opportunity scholarship.
How do the opportunity scholarships work though? How do you get opportunity scholarships?
Well, at this point, you just have to apply. There's no barrier as far as, making enough or making too much money. At this point, as long as if you have a private school that you would like to go to, you can apply for the opportunity scholarship. And
let's say you're going to a religious school. Does it go to religious schools?
Yeah, it has to be.
So if you're going to a religious school, does the school have to follow the other rules that district schools have when it comes to curriculum and other things, or it's just the money follows the student?
Money follows the child at this point. So if the parent decides that, hey, I want to send my kid to this Christian school, or I want them to have Christian values, apply for the opportunity scholarship, and you will likely get it. Your money will be able to go there.
Well, my hope, and I'll throw this out there with your colleagues in Raleigh, that they don't try to push certain things down especially a religious school, and say you can't do certain things because you're taking public money. That's a huge fear, I think.
No, I feel like, no, that is not the case at all. And at the end of the day, it's a choice that the parent is making. I feel like that we, or at least legislators, have realized that, if a parent, let's say a parent decides to send their kid to this conservative Christian school, that's their choice. At the end of the day, that's their choice. And just like a choice of, I want, an African American family or Muslim group that wants to send their kid to, this Muslim school, because they feel like they'll get the best, education that teaches Muslim values. That's their choice as well. And, it would actually be against our Constitution, to do anything to interfere with that.
I keep one in my pocket. Right. Last time I checked, that's in there, regardless of race, color, creed, religion.
Yeah.
You're not to discriminate.
Right. Exactly.
So, well, and if you think about neighborhood schools 40, 50, 60 years ago, that's how everybody was educated, and things were going fairly well.
Yeah.
And to say that one race had to go to school with another race to make it fair, it kind of is an insult to both, to say that you can't educate your own children well. So if you're with somebody different than you, then you'll be smarter. It's not how that didn't work out so well, did it?
Yeah, and that's actually, somebody sent this to me, but that's actually literally what Brown versus the Board of Education said. He said, no, it's unfair because the Black kids are, learning by themselves and they're not with the white kids. No, they're not getting an education because they're not with the white students,
I actually heard somebody verbalize that
Yeah.
recently at a conference, and I was mortified.
Yeah.
And I thought that is the most
Racist.
racist comment I've ever heard in
Just
my
saying.
life.
Yeah, it is.
And a lot
racist,
of people were sitting there going like that. It's like, do you know what was just said?
Yeah.
It's mind numbing.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a foreign country, and there were several years that I was the only white student, the only American in an all boys Filipino school. So I was in fistfights every day, and I was called white monkey and putingonggoy, and I suffered racism every day. But I'm very good friends with these guys today. There was just I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's part of the experience, but it didn't make their experience better because I was there. So
Right.
I was just that white kid. Let's go fight. So I mean, it was.
We can take him.
Yeah, it's like there's 2,000 of us against him. That's why I learned how to fight so good, because I got a lot of fist fights. But no, it is about choice. It is about community, and there's nothing wrong with community schools.
Right. I don't think so either. No.
So, I mean,
No, I agree. Like you might not necessarily agree with everything, but they get that choice, to believe what they want to believe. They get that, and we don't get to decide what people believe just because we disagree.
how refreshing. So I understand you have an election coming up soon. So I certainly hope that you're there next season, because it sounds certainly like we need you in Raleigh. That's for sure.
I appreciate that. Yeah, March 5th is our primary. Early voting is going on right now. So, get to the polls and vote. We need everybody to vote and to, make sure you have your voices heard. More than anything, politicians like me need to hear it. We need to know what voters think. And,
I like to use the term elected official, because politician has such an interesting connotation.
I hate
anymore.
politicians. It's hard for me to even look at myself as a politician.
You're
but
not, you're a policymaker.
That's how everybody else calls me. So I just kind of
Just let it flow.
let it fly, right?
All right, well, I really appreciate you doing this, and I know you're busy on the trail right now, and really appreciate all the work that you've done for parental choice. So people do the right thing for their children and not be bogged down by party bosses and special interest groups forcing you into a corner. So
Yeah,
thank you, sir.
No,
I appreciate it.
It's hard.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate Representative Brockman coming to be with us today and tell his story. So thank you very much on behalf of the Charter School Marketplace. Have a wonderful day.